Greetings and welcome to my latest online sermon. So this one's taken me a little bit of a while to be able to get around to doing, just because I kept wanting to add stuff and do a little bit more research into it, because I suppose it's quite a contentious issue. The reason why I'm doing this particular one is that recently there's been a TV series on Amazon Prime, I think it was, other streaming services are available, but this one's on Amazon Prime, and it's about a TV show called The Handmaid's Tale. And now originally I first watched this as a film in the early 90s. I remember watching this. I think I was a teenager at the time, but I remember watching the film and finding it quite fascinating. And now it's been done as a TV series. It's a fascinating story. It's really well filmed. Actually, it's very edgy, claustrophobic. It's basically a story of life in a very strict theocratic society in what was the United States. So the society itself is dystopian, so it means it's full of suffering and fear. Okay, so fear is definitely the main thing that's going on there. The place is called Gilead. All right, so it's a biblical name. All right, so which comes from the name. Gilead is basically the area on the east of the Jordan River. So that's where the name comes from, but now the United States is called Gilead, and it's ruled by this fundamentalist regime, and it basically treats women like property of the state. Okay, and it's faced with environmental disasters and a plummeting birth rate. So in a desperate attempt to repopulate a devastated world, the few remaining fertile women, so those women who are able to have children, they're forced into sexual servitude. And one of these women, Offred, is determined to survive in this terrifying world that she lives in and find her daughter, who was taken from her. Okay, so it's quite a depressing story. Now, all of the fertile women that are left, basically, if you could have babies, then you were forced to be able to have babies. And what would happen is the fertile women would go to what's called the Rachel and Leah Centre for conditioning, so it's otherwise known as the Red Centre, where they are taught to basically be slaves to the elite ruling class. So couples who were unable to have children, so you've got women who can't have babies in these elite couples, and they would get assigned a handmaiden. So if you were rich enough, you got a handmaid, and then effectively the handmaid was, it's basically rape. They were raped, and so they had to perform this ceremony where the master of the house would have sex with them, impregnate them, and then the baby that's born then becomes the property of that man and his wife who couldn't have children. Now, it's really fascinating because in the series, the apparent justification for this practice comes from the use of the Bible. So the Bible plays heavy. There's really heavy religious thing, well, specifically like the Christian religious themes. So it's attributed to this storyline. And whenever I see a TV show that has a theological edge to it, especially a biblical edge, it piques my interest and I want to investigate it. So whenever God is mentioned in a TV show, I'm always looking to see whether it's designed to muddy his name or whether or not it's actually going to be projecting some truth about God. Generally, I tend to find that it's muddying God's name. It's a way of being able to say, look, the Bible's a load of rubbish and God's rubbish, and look how oppressive it all is and everything, and here's the evidence of it. So what I want to do is I want to look at how legitimate it is. Okay, so there's two things going on in this when I look at this TV show. One is you've got this fundamentalist ruling party called the Sons of Jacob, and they've basically come into power, and they're using the Bible to justify tyranny. That's what they're doing. They're saying this is in the Bible, so this is what we're gonna do. So you've got that. So the two things going on: people use the Bible to justify tyranny, but the second thing is that you've got people will use the apparent justification of tyranny to discredit the Bible. So here's one group using the Bible to justify their tyranny, and the author is effectively saying, get rid of the Bible because look, it's full of tyranny. So the first question is, how likely is it in such a society that the Bible would be used to abuse people? And the answer is very likely. Okay, so why do I say this? Well, the thing is, this is a great example of what happens when people don't read the Bible properly. You get biblical illiteracy. People have used the Bible to justify hatred of blacks, of gays, of Jews. It's been used to justify slavery and greed. So pretty much if you were to take verses out of context, you can use it to hate on anyone. Okay? If you think about in the past, you had the medieval church controlled all of those who were under Christendom. So Christendom is kind of like it's an ungodly society basically that's using the Bible to be able to oppress people. It was powerful. Only the priests were allowed to read the Bible in medieval times. So if your average Christian can't read the Bible, then how can it be defended by those who seek to, how can it be defended against when you find people who want to abuse it? So if your average person on the street doesn't read it, then it can very easily be abused. And it's also true. It's true that the Bible can be used to justify tyranny. Loads of examples of that. Make no excuses whatsoever. Shouldn't have happened. There's loads of stuff that happens to people that shouldn't. But in the same way that radical religion can creep in, radical anti-God can creep in as well. Okay? So, considering the way that God is portrayed in TV shows, that Christianity in particular is portrayed in TV shows and on Facebook, with memes and all sorts of stuff, people become conditioned to hate Christianity, and they'll pity any fool that sincerely believes the Bible. It's a drip, drip, drip of brainwashing designed to condition people to reject the Bible without checking to see if it's really saying what is being said about it. So because of this, whenever a TV show appears that is doing its best to portray the Bible as evil, there are lots of viewers who will accept it without questioning and allow it to enforce the negative stereotyping that they've already been programmed with. Okay, so it's ironic that the very conditioning that a biblical skeptic would accuse a Bible believer of is the same conditioning that instructs them to reject the Bible without anything other than a skewed cursory glance, which means they're looking at it a little bit, but already with their own prejudice and their own bias that's been built up by someone else telling them stuff, and they haven't really checked it out. So anytime we see God or the Bible being presented on TV or media, we need to be asking ourselves, is this an accurate portrayal, or is someone toying with us? Okay, so we need to do that. Are we being toyed with? With this mindset, we need to look at the biblical evidence that's used to justify the creation of the society of the Handmaid's Tale. Okay, when we enter into the world of the Bible, each one of us will be naturally bringing our own baggage. We'll have our own bias and prejudices and our own assumptions. Okay, we can't get away from that, and you have to admit that, otherwise you're not really being honest with yourself. Okay, we always need to consider this carefully when we read an ancient text. So I think a fair question to ask ourselves is, how are the abuses that I've suffered in my life affecting the way that I perceive the world? How do the abuses that I've suffered affect the way that I perceive the Bible, or want to perceive the Bible? And so with that in mind, let's have a look at the passage that's being used in The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, so we're going to call this the Battle of the Babes, all right? So here, I'll read the passage, and then what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about the backstory, okay? So here's the passage, and those of you who've watched The Handmaid's Tale will recognise this. It's Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 to 6. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" So she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, and so that I may also have children by her." Then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. So this is the famous passage in The Handmaid's Tale. So to start off with, I want to talk about what I call PPS, okay, which is perfect person syndrome, or perfect people syndrome. And this is where someone will look at characters in the Bible and will assume that all of them are perfect and all of their actions are godly. They go, oh, they're in the Bible, they're talked about in the Bible, so therefore their actions must be godly. So I don't know where that understanding has come from, considering that the Bible is full of murder, theft, rape, adultery, perversion, incest, greed, envy, plotting and scheming. Okay, so when we read about people in the Bible, we soon come to realise it's better than any soap opera or drama or thriller or action movie. It depicts the very worst and the very best of humanity. So with that in mind, here's the backstory. So you've got this woman Rachel, clearly, and this guy called Jacob. They're the people, and Bilhah, they're mentioned inside the text. Jacob, total swindler, right? Total cheat, all right? He is gangster to the max, okay? Totally self-centered guy. He's had to run away to go and live with his uncle because basically he just cheated his brother out of inheritance and out of a blessing and out of a birthright, okay? So some really serious stuff going on in his family. He's had to run away because his brother's going to kill him. He then goes to visit his uncle Laban, all right. And when he's nearing Laban's camp, where the family live, he meets Rachel, who is Laban's daughter, and he falls in love with her. So even cheats and swindlers fall in love. Okay, so here's Jacob falling in love with Rachel. Okay, so he ends up working for his uncle. And he says to his uncle, look, I love your daughter Rachel and she loves me and, I really want to marry her. So Laban says, well, better that she gets married to you than somebody else. Laban himself is a total swindler. Jacob's met his match here. Laban is a total swindler and a pretty godless man. So Laban says, yeah, you can marry my daughter. 7 years later, on the wedding night, Jacob discovers that he's been tricked. He's been tricked into marrying Rachel's older sister Leah. Right now, she's not the one that Jacob loved. Jacob loved Rachel, but Laban has tricked him. So these daughters, they've grown up in a household of swindling and cheats. They've grown up with a dad who's used to getting his own way. So I can imagine that it's been fairly easy, even if they haven't wanted it. It's been very easy for the dad to convince them that they need to do as they're told, and that Leah's going to marry Jacob, and Rachel can just shut her mouth and be a good girl. All right. Leah is unloved. Okay, Jacob doesn't love Leah. He's not interested in her as a wife. He's been forced to marry her, but he doesn't reject her and he doesn't divorce her because actually he has got some moral standing there. But he says to Laban, "What's going on?" Laban's like, "Well, we don't actually give the first daughter or the younger daughter before the first one's married." He uses that as a total blag. He could have said that in the start, and then Jacob would have went, oh, well, I'll wait for Leah to get a husband, and then I'll wait for Rachel. Because he says, Laban says, tell you what, mate, finish the bridal week, then I'll give you my other daughter as a wife, and you can marry the woman that you love, and she can marry you, but you've got to work another 7 years after that for me. So basically, Laban manages to trick. He gets free manual labour from Jacob for 14 years. Okay. The film, The Handmaid's Tale, or the TV show, is very clever, and it's quite careful about what verses it uses. So Leah is unloved, but is bearing children. So God has heard her cry, and God allows her to have children. So she's fertile, she's having children, but Rachel can't have children at this point. Okay, she has children later on, but not right now. And there's obviously lots and lots of animosity between the two sisters, and anybody who's sort of like who knows anything about families, and especially broken families, dysfunctional families, knows that sibling rivalry can become incredibly bitter. All right, and I think we need to be honest about that kind of thing. But there's some interesting verses that are used here. The whole sort of like, I can't have children, and here's my servant, and that. One of the verses that's missed out, right? So I watched The Handmaid's Tale, and I was reading through. I was reading the passage while listening to the verses. There's a verse that's missed out, and it's quite interesting because it speaks a lot, and it shows the bias that actually is coming through from the person who's designed or written the film or the book. All right. So the verse that's missed out is, And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel. And he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Now, the idea is in this handmaid society that the men are kind of like, you are going to produce children. I'm going to have the handmaid is going to produce the children. Everything is about the men being in charge and the men being powerful and forcing this. Whereas actually, when you read the text, it's nothing to do with Jacob. Jacob is in fact saying, well, what do you want me to do about a woman? I can't help you here, right? I can't suddenly make you pregnant. We've tried, I love you, but, I'm not in the place of God. I can't magically make you have children, okay? So that's the only interaction that Jacob has is to say, I can't help you here, right? Everything else comes from the women, all right? So not including this verse actually paints Jacob in a worse light. It makes it look as though the choice wasn't Rachel's, right? What we need to do when we're looking at the Bible is we need the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we know in courts that is what is asked for. The judge says, I want you to tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because you can tell a bit of the truth and you can leave a bit of the truth out, and by leaving a bit of the truth out, actually it skews the little bit of truth that you've already done. And people are very good at this. People are very good at editing a story or leaving stuff out to be able to project something which effectively turns out to be a lie. And I would say this is a lie being projected here by using the scripture that is being used. So Jacob gets angry, all right? So some people might go, well, that's really bad. You've got a husband here getting angry at his wife. What's going on? This is... look, it's another male getting angry at his wife, short fuse, toxic masculinity, smash the oppressive patriarchy, all the usual rubbish that we hear being spouted quite a lot. So this is, this is another opportunity to have a go at Jacob here. So the person who looks at it that way, that this is toxic masculinity, that this is a husband with a short fuse, they do so because they've been conditioned to do so, all right? But let's look at what's behind the anger. Jacob is gutted that he's been tricked by his uncle into marrying the wife that he didn't want to marry, okay? I think everybody can appreciate not wanting to be forced into a marriage that you didn't agree with, both men and women, all right? Let's be fair about it. He's gutted that the fairy tale of being married to Rachel has been shattered by the fact that this other wife has now been forced upon him. And he's gutted that he can't fix the problem, all right? Men are quite sensitive, funnily enough, okay? So, for example, you might have a wife who observes that the handrail around your decking is a little bit loose, and she mentions this to her husband, all right? The husband will interpret this, or can interpret this as, you are useless and lazy, and if you're any kind of man, you'd get it fixed. That's what a lot of men will hear. The handrail, the wife innocently saying, the handrail, I've just noticed the handrail on the decking, she's just making a passing comment, right? Okay, so he's hearing you're useless and, you need to get that fixed if you're any kind of a man. If that's the case for a loose decking rail, think about what Jacob is hearing. You can't give me children. You are a useless man. You cannot do anything for me. But that's what, so Jacob is going to be frustrated. The relationship between Jacob and Rachel is a strained one. He loves her, she loves him, but they can't have children. It's bound to cause tension. In reality, couples these days will feel exactly the same. And there's a natural frustration that comes from, that causes unfair expectations, right? It's an impossible task for Jacob, and probably the latest in an ongoing issue. So Jacob has always felt capable. Normally, if you read the story of Jacob, and, if people say, yeah, I want to hear more about Jacob, I can do other videos. Jacob's always felt capable on top of every situation. He's a wrangler, a wheeler, a dealer. He's always, he's like the guys in, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrel, and The Gentleman, and all those kind of films where the guys, like, he can't be tricked, he can't be undone. He's man of the moment. He's an immortal kind of thing. All right, so he naturally is going to see his inability to have children with the wife he loves as an attack on his ability, all right? So no wonder he's getting angry, all right? He feels frustrated, and he's like, what do you want me to do about it, woman? I can't help you here, all right? Now, partially, this is Jacob's fault, okay? Partially it's Jacob's fault because he's not actually bothering with God, all right? Why doesn't he take a leaf out of his father's book, all right? So his father, Isaac, right, his wife, Rebecca, Jacob's mum, could not have children either. And what Isaac did was he prayed and he said, God, can you do something about it? and God opens Rebecca's womb and allows her to have children. Now, some people might scoff at the idea of this, that, this is a made-up fairy tale, the Bible's a load of rubbish. Well, I'll tell you what, I put this kind of stuff into practice all the time, all right? So in the Bible it says the guy prayed about this with the woman who couldn't have children, and she could have children. Right? I take that on board, and I'm like, right, well, if it's in the Bible, if God says that if God's powerful, he can do this kind of stuff, let's see it happen in practice. And I pray for lots of people. There's been people I know who have not been able to have children. I've prayed for them, and then suddenly the wife has got pregnant, okay? And it happens far more than it can possibly be coincidental. All right, not that it matters, because there are some people who, no matter how many prayers get answered, will just refuse to believe it's possible. Okay, so I'm just telling you, I've prayed this kind of prayer and I've seen God in action in real life, not in a biblical story, but real life, and it works and it happens. All right, so it's entirely up to the person listening as to whether or not you want to believe this or just reject it out of hand. Entirely up to you. You can put it into practice. So that's a great thing about God. If you want to check out whether or not he's real or not, just ask him. All right, ask him to deal with a particular situation. The thing is, you've got to get over yourself to be able to ask him that question in the first place. All right. So she says, if you don't give me kids, I'll die, and it'll be your fault. All right. So she's emotional, and she's put an overly emotional demand on him. Okay, that's what she says. Now, why does she? What does she mean? Or else I'll die. Okay, is this exaggeration? Well, maybe she's meaning I'll die as in I can't have children, and therefore there's nobody after me. I'll have no children in my life. There's no one after me. When I die, my family line dies with them, my genes. Not that they understood about genes in those days, but they did understand about the family lines and knowing that we are designed to be able to procreate. We are designed, men and women are designed to get married and have children. That's part of it. Okay, so I will die in the physical sense as my line will. Or I can't live without having children, extreme broodiness. Now, there are some people who would reject the idea of broodiness, but there are enough women who get incredibly broody, that is the desire to have children, that it becomes overwhelming, all right? Overwhelming, and this is nothing to do with men forcing them to have children or anything. This is women desiring to have children themselves and wanting to have children, okay? And if they can't have children, they feel like they're dying inside. So this could be what Rachel's meaning here. Or it could be, I can't live without children because the envy and shame that my sister's putting on me all the time. So Leah would have been like, I'm not the loved one, you are. You can't have children, I can have children. See, look, I'm a proper woman, I can produce children. Can you imagine in a nasty sibling relationship, that kind of stuff would be going on, the spitefulness and everything really driving Rachel to the point of, I can't deal with this anymore. All right. So the emphasis on the TV show is that the Bible makes women totally subject to men. Okay, so you've got this society where the Bible is being abused and used to be able to subjugate women. There's no argument that can happen and that the abuse of the Bible, but the Bible account is not accurate to say that women are forcing and subjecting women here. Now, we've got Laban here. Admittedly, there's truth in there. Men do subjugate women. Sometimes it does happen. Is it right to do that? No, it's not right to do that, okay? But you can't use this passage in the Bible to say this is what God wants, all right? You have to read it properly, okay? So in the film or in the TV show, it shows that the Bible makes women totally subject to men. In contrast, the biblical account has no such emphasis on male enforced subjugation. If it does, you can't find it in the passage. Women are not subject to men in this situation. They're subject to circumstances, okay? Right, so think about this, right? In ancient times, all right, no National Health Service, no police force, no benefits, no council housing, no kind of support structure at this particular point for people who are vulnerable and are in need of support. There was none of that. It was the wilderness. No safety in the wilderness. There's no birth control. So if a woman got pregnant, she didn't have the choice to be able to say, I want to keep the baby or get rid of it. Okay, so there was no choice there. what is what it is. So no social housing, no benefits. A woman, if she chose, she could go it alone in the same way that a man could go it alone. They could leave the camp. All right. So you've got a nomadic camp here, a nomadic society. You've got this family there. They're shepherds that are their resources and everything come from the land, and they could say, do you know what? Stuff this. I'm going to go and do it all by my own. I can be strong and independent and go out into the wilderness. Okay. But whether you're a woman on your own or a man on your own, pretty soon you're going to find yourselves unstuck in the desert. It's better to actually be a part of a community, right? It's better. We can't be independent, all right? It's the ignorant person, the naive person, the arrogant person that thinks that they can be independent. We can't. That's not a mature way of looking at it. We need interdependence. We are dependent on one another. Okay, and the maturity says I am just as much needed by my society as I need the society in which I'm in. Okay, but things are not working out for Rachel. All right, so like a lot of women, she takes matters into her own hands. Something we need to know about Rachel. She's a liar and she's a thief, okay? She's been trained as a schemer by a family of schemers. She's also married to a schemer, a deceiver and a cheat. Anyone feeling sorry for Rachel here, who's a liar and a thief and a stealer and a manipulator? Because what will happen is, if someone will read this passage and they go, oh, the woman's perfect, and the man's really nasty. The woman's lovely, but the man's really nasty, all right? That's clearly not the case here at all, all right? At this point, she's decided that even God can't help her, all right? And I would say there's argument here to say that she doesn't even really believe in God when you start reading the passages and get an idea of her. So she makes a plan. She says to her husband, here's my maidservant, Bilhah. Have sex with her, and she can bear a child on my knees, all right? So that I can have children by her, all right? Okay, so she gave him Bilhah, and Bilhah gets pregnant by Jacob, all right? Did she have any choice, all right? Let's have a look at that, okay, in just a minute. I don't want to. My notes are all over the place here. So this is a sort of like a situation where sisters are doing it for themselves. I won't sing the song, all right. It's kind of like smash the abusive patriarchy, all of this, but it's not that case. All the decisions in this chapter are being made by the women, all right, not by the men, okay. Actually, Jacob could have said, no, I'm not going to sleep with your maidservant Bilhah. Okay, but Rachel's very manipulative. She knows how to handle her husband and everything, and also there's certain laws at that time that she would be calling upon for him to then do this. So for some reason he's decided he could have been more of a man about it, said no, let's just trust God. Let's trust God like my dad trusted God and prayed. Let's pray and let's see God into your womb. But Jacob, he's a weak man, falls for what his wife's saying, and so he effectively has sex and sleeps with the maidservant. Okay, where am I here? Okay. So where did the idea of using the handmaid to start a family come from? Well, it's in the Bible, so God must be saying this is okay. That's the way it's portrayed in The Handmaid's Tale, and that's the way people will automatically, if they're not bothering to read their Bible properly or investigating properly, that's the conclusion that can easily be come to, all right? So does God expect this? There are those who definitely seem to think so, all right? The assumption is that anything that's written in the Bible, that all the people in biblical times are following biblical laws, and that's the case. It's not the case at all. All right. At that time, the law of the biblical law had not even been instituted at this point. Moses wasn't born, and Moses hadn't been directed by God to write down the law. So the law of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So all of that stuff hadn't even been written yet. So what laws are people following at the time? And this is where you need to be thinking. Bear with me 1 second. I need to work out my notes here because I seem to be a little bit lost. Okay. Even Rachel is convinced This is God's plan. So maybe she's heard her husband talking about God, and her husband, is starting to build this relationship with God. Not, he certainly doesn't come across as a particularly Christian guy, but he's definitely got some kind of understanding of theology and a relationship with God there. And maybe that's where Rachel's picked it up from. But she says, then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Right? No, God hasn't heard your case. You decided to give your maidservant to your husband, get him to sleep with her, provide you with a child, and now you're saying, oh, God has heard my case and has given me a son. No, he hasn't. You're just saying that you're now attributing your manipulative scheming plan to God, all right? God didn't give you a son. In fact, what's interesting, the son isn't even hers. In the Handmaid's Tale, all right, as soon as a child is born to a handmaid, it's given to the wife, and the handmaid gets no look in at all, right? They feed it to start with, but after that, the child is classed completely as belonging to the woman who is the woman who's infertile. She, her husband can't, the wife of the husband, right? The rich woman. Everything's credited to that. That child is now officially, completely, totally hers. In the Bible, it doesn't do that. It doesn't credit Rachel as being the mother. Bilhah is always mentioned as being the mother of the children that she bears, okay, and she gets a share in the inheritance, full rights as a wife, okay, so everything is there. So in the Handmaid's Tale, the handmaid is seen as a total slave, subject, the lowest of the low, whereas the biblical account doesn't say that at all, okay. A lot more respect is given to Bilhah, all right, even if this is the wrong way of going about it, okay? So let's have a look here. So if it's not from God, where is it from? Okay, this law about the handmaid using the handmaid. There was a guy called Hammurabi, born around 1810 BC, okay, and lived to about 1750 BC. He was a pagan king, all right? So he was a ruler of the entire kind of like this, the Mesopotamian area, all around the Mediterranean, all that kind of like, especially sort of like Israel and Jordan and sort of like the Turkey and that kind of area, Syria. He was a powerful ruler, okay, and he wrote some laws down, okay? Now, I called him a pagan king. It's good for us to understand the concept of paganism, because people think, when you say pagan, they just think, oh, witches and druids and Stonehenge and all that kind of stuff, yeah? All right, that's not actually an accurate term for paganism. Paganism is basically anything that wasn't Judaism, and then when Christianity turned up, it was anything that wasn't Christianity. So effectively anything, whether it's regardless of what pantheon of gods or individual gods or whatever, if it's not the Yahweh of the Bible, it's pagan. So this guy is effectively a pagan, and he has written down some laws, and one of the laws that he wrote down, okay, is that if a woman cannot bear a child, her handmaid will bear children for her. Okay, that's the law that Rachel is falling back on. Not a biblical law, a pagan law, okay? That's where it's come from. So this is by no means what God wanted to happen, okay? So I think that's pretty much it. The moral, or the biblical moral, actually comes out, and you find this later on. I might do a part 2 actually, so that we understand, the outcome of God's plan for these people. Because these people are literally, they're pretty shameless. It's just a dreadful situation. It's no good. The women and men in this story are not acting in a godly way. So what's the moral? The moral actually is that we need to rely on God and not our own scheming, our own mechanics, our own way of doing stuff. Because the amount of us that actually just say, I can rely on myself, I'm my own God, I don't need a God, I can do life my own way, and we plot and plan and then wonder why everything starts falling to pieces. Okay, so here the idea is that we shouldn't plan and scheme. God has a plan for each one of us. To try and force his hand is sheer folly. So we just need to rely on him. Okay, so thank you for watching this. There probably will be a follow-up part 2 if I get the time. But thank you very much for listening. Feel free to comment. Let me know what you think. Yeah, all right. Take care. God bless. Bye.